Hare Krishna. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayo Radha Tava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari. Pichana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brachachana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brachachana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brachachana Ranjana. Shodanandana Brachachana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sorry, just stopped somehow. Oh my God. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajkacharya Sutra Sata Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Go Premanande Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udiraye Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtikir. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 25, Text 12. Nasadu meneta sarva.
Nasadu meneta sarva.
Nasadu meneta sarva.
Nasadu meneta sarva.
Bhutale yavati puraha.
Bhutale yavati puraha.
Bhutale yavati paraha.
Bhutale yavati puraha.
Kaman kamaya manasau. Kaman kamaya manasau. Tasya tasyo papataye. Tasya tasyo papataye. Na sadhu meneta sarva. Bhutale yavati puraha. Kaman kamaya manaso. Tasya tasyo papataye. Sadhu mene tasya.
Bhutale yavati puraha. Kaman kamaya manosau. Tasya tasyo papataye. Nasadu meneta sarva. Nasadu meneta sarva. Bhutale yavati pura. Bhutale yavati pura. Kaman kamaya manosau.
Kaman kamaya manasau.
Tasya tasyo papataye.
Tasya tasyo papataye. Vaishnavis. Na sadhu meneta sarva. Bhutale yavati puraha. Kaman kamaya manaso. Tasya tasyo papataye. Na, never. Sadhu, good. Mene, thought. Taha, them. Sarvaha, all. Bhutale, on this earth. Yavati, all kinds of. Puraha, residential houses. Kaman, objects for sense enjoyment. Kama yamanaha, desiring. Asau, that king. Tasya, his. Tasya, his. Upapataye, for obtaining. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. King Puranjana had unlimited desires for sense enjoyment. Consequently, he traveled all over the world to find a place where all his desires could be fulfilled. Unfortunately, he found a feeling of insufficiency everywhere. Translation. Srila Vidyapati, a great Vaishnava poet, has sung Tatala Saikate Varibhindu Sama Sutta Mita Ramani Sammaje. Material sense gratification with society, friendship and love is herein compared to a drop of water falling on a desert. A desert requires oceans of water to satisfy it, and if only a drop of water is supplied, what is its use? Similarly, the living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra, is Anandamaya Bhasat, full of enjoyment. Being part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity is also seeking complete enjoyment. However, complete enjoyment cannot be achieved separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In his wandering in the different species of life, the living entity may taste some type of enjoyment in one body or another, but full enjoyment of the senses cannot be obtained in any material body. Thus, Puranjana, the living entity, wanders in different types of bodies, but everywhere meets frustration in his attempt to enjoy. In other words, the spiritual spark covered by matter cannot fully enjoy the senses in any circumstances in material life. A deer may become absorbed in the musical sounds vibrated by the hunter, but the result is that it loses its life. Similarly, a fish is very expert in gratifying its tongue, but when it eats the bait offered by the fisherman, it loses its life. Even the elephant, who is so strong, is captured and loses its independence while satisfying its genital with a female elephant. In each and every species of life, the living entity gets a body to satisfy various senses, but he cannot enjoy all his senses at one time. In a human form of life, he gets an opportunity to enjoy all his senses pervertedly, but the result is that he becomes so harassed in his attempt at sense gratification that he ultimately becomes morose. As he tries to satisfy his senses more and more, he becomes more and more entangled. And that's the sad story of the Puranjana, the old story. It's interesting, this shloka, and of course the whole story really boils it down to the essence of like sometimes we have phases of Bhagavatam describe some dynasty and creation, this and that, but here is like really, okay, this is I think we can relate to what's described here, right? Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Namo Bhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapatantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyas Cha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Papanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nasadu Menita Sarva Bhutale Yavati Puraha Kaman Kamayamano So Tasya Tasya Upapataye. King Puranjana had unlimited desires for the senses enjoyment. Consequently, he traveled all over the world to find a place where all his desires could be fulfilled. Unfortunately, he found a feeling of insufficiency everywhere. So here this couple of shlokas, they started the analogy, the story describing. And here is described that King Puranjana, first of all, he had unlimited desires for sense enjoyment. And that's the characteristic of the conditioned soul. Which also means that we also have unlimited material desires. Have you already noticed? if you look in our hearts, there's so many desires actually. And these desires have been there for time immemorial, and Prabhupada also explains in the purport why the desire is there. Why is the desire there? We want happiness, yes. Because as souls, we are part and parcel of Krishna. Krishna is full of bliss, he's full of ananda, and always pleasure seeking, and so we are part of the Lord. It's our birthright to be blissful, basically. Of course, in the conditioned stage, sometimes we are happy, and then sometimes we are depressed, and sometimes we are joyful, and sometimes we are thoughtful, and we have so many different emotions we go through. But actually, we have a birthright to be blissful always, like constantly, just full of bliss. That would be our right, because we are part and parcel of Krishna, and we are meant to be blissful always. But because we are covered by the material nature, and we identify with the body and with the mind, we go through all these different stages. But inside, somehow we know, in our heart we know we want to be blissful, so that's why there's such a strong drive, such a strong urge or desire to find happiness. And Prabhupada beautifully describes that because we identify with the body, we think we find pleasure through the body. I want happiness, I am the body, so I have to give pleasure to my body, then I get happiness. And that's the basic illusion, and that's what we have been doing for millions of lifetimes. Haribol. That's the old story. So in here it says, Puranjana, the living entity, consequently traveled all over the world to find places where all his desires could be fulfilled. And in the Sanskrit it says, Puraha, residential houses. And what are these residential houses actually? Bodies. 8,400,000 species of life, all kind of different bodies. And the soul, conditioned by the false ego, and all, pushed by all the desires, accepts one body after the other, after the other, after the other. Also according to the desires we have, according to the activities we did in the past, then we get a new set of senses, a new body, just suitable to continue our search for happiness and trying to get happiness in a new body. But what happens? He unfortunately he found a feeling of insufficiency everywhere. Somehow, although trying and trying and trying very hard, there is always a feel of something is lacking, something is missing. It's not completely. Sometimes we're happy, then again we are miserable. Yeah. And we have not heard that for the first time, right? That's kind of one of the essential truths in Krishna consciousness we hear in every Sunday lecture. But yeah, what to do? That's the topic. So let's reflect a bit more about it. That's the idea. Why do we hear it again and again? Because repetition is important. Because although we hear the knowledge, the mind still thinks that, yeah, that's Bhagavatam class, but now real life is different. Yeah, theoretically I know, but I feel strongly it's different. So we have to hear again. So Prabhupada quotes Srila Vidyapati, a great poet, and he says that material sense gratification which takes place in society, in friendship and love, and that's like the essence. Everyone wants to have. Society means society. He wants to be part of a society. He wants to have thousands of friends nowadays with social media. You need some social status. Everyone is striving for that. And the more famous you become, the better you are. That's basically, everyone wants to be something special. And then friendship, you want to be surrounded by, many people, and they should be cool and they should give you pleasure. Basically, friendship means you have other people who help you to find pleasure. Like I remember when I decided to become a Hare Krishna. My friends didn't like it so much actually. No, they told me, so what's wrong now? What do you? I mean, I went to India and then I came back as a monk. You know, like they kind of what's. So now we can't even go to a bar and drink a beer with you. So basically, no, they were used to find some pleasure in my association, you know, because together we're doing something and we find pleasure. But now I'm not into that pleasure anymore, and they can see that we can't get out anything of this guy because he became so sober. So then that friendship has no meaning anymore, you know? And it's very superficial. But that's usually what the friendship is. And then love, of course, that's love which we're searching for that romantic emotional satisfaction. And we can find that to some degree, but then also even that usually is, you know, becomes disappointed. Even if it's perfect, it becomes disappointed because it's temporary. No. Even if you find the perfect partner, you have a beautiful life, but at some point it will be over, and latest then it will be disappointing because you lose the one you love so much. So therefore, the analogy given here is it's just like a drop in the ocean. I don't know, have you been in a desert, some of you? You have been? I've never been. Huh? Sahara, in the Sahara Desert, wow. Was it an adventure? Yeah, it's kind of camel riding, wow. Wow. But yeah, I guess it's quite hot, right? And you know, the only thing you find there is sand, basically, right? So water becomes very essential, and if you really, you know, I mean, I can hardly imagine, but if you're there for days and days and you don't get water, you die, you know. And people do die in the desert because they don't have water. And if someone comes and gives you a drop of water, it's not. It's basically completely useless. And this is compared that what we understand as happiness. And when we hear this, we think, oh no, this is kind of übertrieben, how I say? Exaggerated, you know, like, come on, you know. We find happiness and pleasure in this world. But the point is, compared to what the soul actually needs, it's just a drop. Because the soul actually looks for a different kind of happiness. And Brother explains, actually, true enjoyment, true happiness can only be found with Krishna, and it cannot be found separate from Krishna. And that's the great illusion, that we try to find happiness without Krishna. That's the problem. And of course there is many songs and many shlokas that describe the, you know, temporary and flickering nature of so-called happiness in the material world. The famous one is which song? Bhajahure mana Shrinanda Nandana Abhaya Charanara Vindare Dulabha Manava Chanama Satsange Taro Ebhava Sindure. I mean, the main point is the next one. Viphala Sevino Krippana Durajana Chappala Sukha Lapa Laki Re. O mind, just worship the lotus feet of the son of Nanda, which make one feel less. Having obtained this rare human birth, cross over this ocean of worldly existence through the association of saintly persons. So Govinda Das, the poet, first says, okay, you got a human form of life, do something good out of it, you should take sadhu sangha, and with the help of that sadhu sangha, you should cross over the worldly existence. And then in the next shloka he describes the miserable condition, both in day and at night, remaining sleepless, suffering the pains of the heat and cold, the wind and the rain, meaning happiness and distress. You know, it's not, I don't, you know, I have a house, I have an umbrella, I don't have a problem with rain. No, it's in a poetic way to say that the material world is full of happiness and distress, and especially distress. For a fraction of flickering happiness, I have uselessly served the wicked and miserly man. Now, there's a little happiness we find, but in order to get that happiness, we work hard, and even we sell ourselves in a sense that we become slave of some boss we go to work and we become, like the slave of someone who is really a rascal, and then we, yes, I will do this, yes, just because that we need some money at the end of the day. What assurance of real happiness is there in all of one's wealth, youthfulness, sons and family members? Now we gather this family around us to find happiness, but what is the assurance? This life is tottering like a drop of water on a lotus petal. Therefore you should always serve and worship the divine feet of Lord Hari. So, the lotus petal, that's why we say the lotus feet of the Guru, and the lotus eyes, and the lotus hand, the lotus face, everything is lotus. When it comes to divinity, when it comes to description, poetic description of the divine, of God, is always a lotus. We know because the lotus comes out of the dirty place, right? From the mud, but then it's completely unaffected by it. It's outside in the water, and then even if some water drops or something, it falls off the leaf immediately, and the lotus remains unaffected by it. So that means the lotus is a symbol of transcendence. It's beyond the influence of the three gunas. That's basically the significance of lotus. But here it says like a drop of water is on a lotus petal, but that drop, it will, like, the next moment it will fall off, because it's not meant to stay there. So similarly, that's the, Kamala Dala Jala, Jivana Dalamala. It's very flickering. And before it was said, the flickering happiness that we search, and we become a slave, that was a Chapala Sukala. Chapala means flickering, Sukha, very short happiness. And then so what should we do? We should associate with the sadhus and cross over the material ocean. And how we do that? Shravanam Kirtanam Smaranam Vandanam Padasevanam Dasyam Puja Saki Jana Atmani Vedana Govinda Dasa Abhilasare. The 9 process of devotional service we should follow. Bhaktivinoda Thakur also speaks about this, of course, in many songs. This is from Kalyana Kalpataru, and there we find some prayers to the mind. My dear mind, I do not like this material existence. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, I don't like. For it's simply full of birth, death and old age. Tell me, what beside these is the essence of material life? There is just birth, disease, old age, death. That's mainly what is there. Sounds very pessimistic. Wealth, followers, family, none of these actually belong to you. They act as your friend when they need you, and they act as strangers when they don't need you. Whatever I would like to keep within my possession, I cannot keep, because everything is temporary and perishable. So what's the use? It's just so temporary. And then in a later song he says, the word here he uses is chaya vichai praya, which means this material world is just like a magical display. Being attached to this illusion, I'm spending my days uselessly. The material world is like a magical display. I like this. It's like magical display. It is not real. It's not. It pretends to be something, and we think it will give us something, but at the end of the day, it will not give us what we actually looking for. And some time ago I came across an interesting description of the Sapta Dosha, the 6 faults in material pleasure. You like to hear the 6 faults? You sure? So all forms of material pleasure and happiness and all material goals have 7, not 6, 7, Sapta heißt 7. 7 defects, known as the Sapta dosha. So these are, the first is Alpa. You know Alpa? Small means, like not enough or little. When I was I lived for 1 year in Orissa, and then when they were serving rice, because in Orissa, everyone eats a mountain of rice. And you can't believe, an old man, like very thin old man, and then he has such a mountain of rice. This would be enough for a whole week for me. No, seriously, they eat so much rice. It's like, of course, the rice is also a little different nature. You can eat more of that. It's a little less, but still, they eat so much rice. So I always had to say when they were serving, Alpa, little. So Alpa means the result of material pleasure or trivial. Trivial, how you say in German? Trivial, huh? Banal, or Alpa wenig. No, it's not. Whatever pleasure you get from material pleasures, it's actually not really. Doesn't give you much. That's the first mistake. And the second, asthira. They are transient and impermanent. Impermanent, it comes and goes. You can't keep it. You get some pleasure, but it also goes. Alles hat ein Ende, nur die. It always has an end. 3 is, sorry, that one. Asukara. Asukara, yeah. Kara means doing something, so not easily obtained. So they require much effort and are time consuming. So in order to get material pleasure, it requires so much hard work to get it, and so much arrangement for that pleasure you want. And then asu kavashana, which means ultimately ending in grief and disappointments. So first of all, it takes so much time to get it, and at the end you're not satisfied at all. And then 6th, anuchittam, incompatible with your essential being. And I think that's important. It's incompatible with the essential being, like the soul. Satchidananda Maharaj gives the example of, you have sometimes this wooden play, these toys, and then you have a board with different shapes, circle and triangle and quadruple or something. And then you have pieces of wood and you have to put them in the right place. You have seen this? So that we have in our heart, we have a Shyam Sundar shaped like hole, like this. There's a shape in our, like a hole in our heart, and it has the shape of Shyama Sundar. And no matter what we do, only if we place Krishna there, we will be satisfied. But we're trying to push so many other things in this hole, and we never become satisfied. So the pleasures that we find in the material world, they are not compatible with the soul. Like we know, not compatible if you have, you get all these technical tools and you get a cable and you get a window cable, you have a Mac, and then somehow it doesn't fit in. So then, and then the 7th one, abhimana mula. They are based upon a false sense and self and lead to further perpetuation of this delusive sense of identity. So they are based on illusion also. So there.
You skip the 6th one.
I will repeat it again. So it's only little. They give little. It's temporary, not easy obtained, ends in disappointment.
Incompatible with soul.
5th. I skipped the 5th one.
Oh.
I think accompanied by disappointments and supported only by struggle, which is similar to 4. I don't know. 4 is unlimitedly ending in grief, and 5 is accompanied by disappointments and supported only by struggle. Yeah. And then 6 incompatible, and 7 based on illusion. Hare Krishna. That's what we are dealing with in a material world, and that's why we don't get. That's why when Puranjana is going from one house to the next, it always remains unsatisfied, because the kind of pleasure that he's seeking in this world, or that's the nature of this happiness. So then, what do we looking for? Something else first. Okay, we can speak about what we mentioned already. We're looking for, the soul is actually looking for something else, for the spiritual satisfaction. Prabhupada gives a beautiful purport. I like to read part of it, about hunger. No, that the soul is hungry. I have different one. First canto, chapter 12, text 6. The shloka goes like this. O Brahma, it's about Yudhisthira Maharaj. O Brahmanas, the opulence of King Yudhisthira was so enchanting that the denizens of heaven aspired for it. But because he was absorbed in the service of the Lord, nothing could satisfy him except the Lord's service. So Yudhisthira was surrounded by all material opulences, but he was not much attracted to it. And the only thing that gave him true satisfaction in his heart was when he was able to serve Krishna. That was give him satisfaction. Prabhupada gives a beautiful purport. Okay, I'll just read the part. There are two things in the world which can satisfy living beings. When one is materially engrossed, he is satisfied only by sense gratification. But when one is liberated from the condition of the material modes, he is satisfied only by rendering loving service for the satisfaction of the Lord. This means that the living being is constitutionally a servitor and not one who is served. And then Prabhupada makes a point that we try to play the master, but actually we become the servant of our senses. That's our condition. Maharaj Yudhisthira was one of the liberated souls, and therefore for him there was no pleasure in a vast kingdom, good wife, obedient brothers, happy subjects, and prosperity worlds. These blessings automatically follow for a pure devotee, even though the devotee does not aspire for them. The example set herein is exactly suitable. It is said that one who is hungry is never satisfied by anything other than food. No, if you're really hungry, I don't know, sometimes we travel, a long journey and we don't get the proper food, and then we finally come to the temple and someone kept some prasadam for me, oh yes, take me. No, if someone else comes with something else, we're not so interested because we really need some food. And then Prabhupada says, the whole material world is full of hungry living beings. The whole material world is full of hungry living beings. The hunger is not for good food, shelter or sense gratification. The hunger is for the spiritual atmosphere. So nice, no? All the living entities, they're all hungry. They're all hungry for the spiritual atmosphere. Due to ignorance only, they think that the world is dissatisfied because there is no sufficient food, shelter. This is called illusion. When a living being is hungry for spiritual satisfaction, he is misrepresented by material hunger. But the foolish leaders cannot see that even the people who are most sumptuously materially satisfied are still hungry. And what is their hunger and poverty? This hunger is actually for spiritual food, spiritual shelter, spiritual defense, and spiritual sense gratification. These can be obtained in the association of the Supreme Spirit, Lord Sri Krishna. And therefore one who has them cannot be attracted by the so-called food. Therefore in the Bhagavad Gita it's said that the Lord, that even in the topmost planet of the universe, namely Brahmaloka, where the duration of life is multiplied by millions of years, by earthly calculation one cannot satisfy his hunger. So hunger can be satisfied only when a living being is situated in immortality. Only then the jiva can be satisfied. So beautiful purport, and And this is also, from this we can understand, because sometimes, from the material point of view, we think that, they don't have food, these people are hungry and they are so poor. And then we go to the Bahnhofstrasse and we see people, taking some food in a restaurant, and very rich fellows, we think, they are very wealthy and satisfied. But actually, from the eyes of a pure devotee, the people who is actually starving from food and the people who is very opulently, they're both poor and they're both hungry. So that's why, the spiritual food that we try to give to people, for example, in form of books, when we give them spiritual knowledge, that's for everyone. It's not for the poor. It's because everyone is poor. So I think that's a very nice meditation. Nevertheless, because we are in ignorance, we're still looking for in the wrong place. We still go for the material sense gratification. And what is the result if we don't have sadhu sangha and we don't understand the point and we go for material sense gratification? What is the result? Suffering. Frustration. I'm frustrated to hear all the time that I'm frustrated in the material world here. Krishna Premarupa, can't you talk something more enlivening? Okay, what about this one? This is the consequence. Nunam pramate kurote vikarna yat indriya pritya aprinoti na sadhu manye yata atmanoyam asan apikleshata ashadeha. And Prabhupada gives a long translation. It's like sometimes when Prabhupada translated Sanskrit shlokas, he gives a whole purport in the text, right? He's not kind of just word by word translation, but he gives a deeper meaning in it sometimes. But it's very powerful. And when a person considers sense gratification the aim of life, which 99% of everyone is doing, right? He certainly becomes mad after materialistic living and engages in all kinds of sinful activity. He does not know that due to his past misdeeds, he has already received a body which, although temporary, is the cause of his misery. Actually, the living entity should not have taken on a material body, but he has been awarded the material body for sense gratification. Therefore, I think it's not befitting an intelligent man to involve himself again in the activities of sense gratification, by which he perpetually gets material bodies one after another. And this shloka fits very well to today's shloka, because that's Puranjana. Puranjana is taking one body after another. Why? Because of the desire for sense gratification. And each time he suffers again. Why? Because the body is meant for suffering. That's why a sober person, sadhu, someone who is sober, he will not again go for sense gratification. Because by going more into sense gratification, you just end up with disappointment and again a material body and more suffering. And that's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, what is the shloka there? Yehi samspasha cha bhuga dukkha yonaya evate adyanta vanta kaunteya nate shuramate buddha. Wow, I still remember at least some shloka by heart. So the Buddha, the intelligent person, does not find pleasure in and the pleasure which comes from the contact from the sense and sense objects. And why not? Because actually that kind of pleasure is dukkha yonaya. It's actually the source of misery and suffering. And why is that? Because adyanta vanta, it has a beginning and an end. That's the bad news. we think, how to get pleasure? Well, just gratify the senses and we can be happy. But Krishna says no. Actually, it's the source of misery. And the reason for that is because you never find satisfaction there. So, and what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that there is a need for sense control. And of course, then developing a higher taste ultimately, and developing our relationship with Krishna. But we have to start with tapasya. There is a need for tapasya. And that topic is very nicely explained in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, many shlokas describing the topic of what happens if the senses become strong. And in this purport we got the example how the senses are very strong, and the senses always lead the living entity into troubles, right? And there's different animals are given. The fish is very much attached to taste, right? Is it? Yeah, taste. And then likes to taste something, and then the Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Shishi Gonetai Ki Chai. Then the fishermen, they put a little worm on the hook, and the fish thinks, very nice, very nice. And it goes for its taste, and then when it bites the worm, then it's captured by the hook and finish. So that's one example. Then the deer likes sound, and then the hunter, they play a flute or something, or create some sound, and then the deer runs after the sound, and then the hunter, or like this previously. And then the elephant, the example with the elephant is the sense of touch. I mean, here it's genitals were mentioned, but it says the way how they capture elephants, they make somehow they make a hole and cover it with grass, and then somehow with a she elephant, and when the elephant is attached to some sense of touch with the she elephant, and then the elephant falls into the ditch, something like that. There's some description, and then what else we have? Sight. What is the example of sight? It's the insects who see a light. The insects are always attracted to light, and sometimes at night time there is a fire burning, and the insects are, and then they see the fire, and then they straight enter into the fire. And then they burn. Yeah. And what else? Did we miss one? Smell. What was smell? Yeah, right. The bee is attracted to smell and fragrance, go to different flowers, but some flower at the night time they close, and then the bee is captured, dies. So this, do you know the origin of this analogy? It must be some, I don't know, some Puranic shloka or something. But Prabhupada refers to it several places. Yeah. So it describes how, for different living entities, a different form of sense is especially kind of attractive, and by going for the sense gratification, the result is death, or like misery, pain, suffering. And then it says that in a human form of life, and especially with sex life, that's where all the senses are engaged. And we don't need to describe it in detail, but all the senses are engaged in some way, and then that's why it becomes an overwhelming experience. It's a very sensual experience, and you can completely lose yourself and forget about, and you completely identify with the body. That's what it does, because it's such a sensual experience. You completely identify with the body, and you completely get into it. And this is then also what binds us in the material world, because the desire to again and again enjoy that happiness. Yes, and therefore there is a need for sense control. And Krishna says in Gita, Yada samharhate jayam kurmo na niva sarvasha indriyanindriyartebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. And then Prabhupada says, and with this I will end, time is up. The test of a yogi, devotee or self-realized soul is that he is able to control the senses according to his plan. Most people, however, are servants of the senses and are thus directed by the dictation of the senses. That is the answer to the question as to how the yogi is situated. The senses are compared to venomous serpents. They want to act very loosely and without restriction. The yogi or the devotee must be very strong to control the serpents, like a snake charmer. Have you seen in India? I've seen sometimes, in Rishikesh we have seen. Actually, I made a video. I can show you if you like. Then a yogi sits there with a very fancy flute. There is a basket, and he starts to play the flute. And then the snake comes out, raises his hoods, and dances like this. And then when the sound is over, it goes back. So the yogi is in control of the serpent by sound or by mantras. So the yogi, similarly, because the senses are like unrestricted serpents, the yogi needs to control them. He never allows them to act independently. There are many injunctions in the revealed scriptures. Some of them are don'ts and some of them are do's. Unless one is able to follow the do's and the don'ts, restricting oneself from sense enjoyment, it is not possible to be firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. The best example is said herein is the tortoise. The tortoise can at any moment wind up his senses and exhibit them again at any time for particular purpose. The tortoise can just withdraw his legs, closes the eyes, and then in the shell, and then if needed, again out. Similarly, the senses of the Krishna conscious person are used only for some particular purpose in the service of the Lord and are withdrawn otherwise. Arjuna is taught here to use his senses for the service of the Lord instead of for his own satisfaction. Keeping the senses always in the service of the Lord is the example set by the analogy of the tortoise who keeps the senses within. And I found this a powerful statement by Prabhupada. He says, the devotee uses his senses, he uses his senses for Krishna Seva, and otherwise he doesn't use it and withdraws it. It's like, wow. No space out on Facebook, social media, or no eating some nonsense, no looking in the wrong place, I would just, the senses, you're sober and you use the senses in service, and otherwise you control them. And that's a sober Krishna conscious person, and that's what we are meant to do. And if we do so, and then of course by engaging the senses in devotional service, Sarupadi Nirmit Muktam, we spoke about this, then the senses become purified, and then also we develop a higher taste in the service of the Lord, and we find that true satisfaction. Then we become free from the bondage and the results. Okay, these are some reflections on this shloka. Nothing new, but I guess good to hear again. Any comments or questions? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to try a comment.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when we hear that we have to restrict our senses, so it has something very bitter and hard. And then
energy.
the heart may become a little hard also. And actually, in the way you told it, it's like we please the senses of Krishna, and in that way, it's pleasure. It's pleasure for us also. You see that?
Yes, and that's what in the purport that I read, 12.6, Prabhupada says the living entity has a hunger, a hunger for, and then Prabhupada says not for spiritual sense gratification, for spiritual pleasure, for spiritual enjoyment. So we need enjoyment, we need pleasure, and we want pleasure. But we have to learn to find the pleasure at the right place. And the right place is with Krishna, finding pleasure with Krishna. Our problem is that we always seek pleasure without Krishna. Now I do my service, my duty, and then I seek pleasure for myself. It's like, but no, we should try to find the pleasure in the service with Krishna and find pleasure there. But it's a very good point, because this kind of teaching can, as you said, like renunciation, tapasya, can make the heart harder, and that's a danger. But that's the beauty with bhakti. That it's not that we don't use the senses anymore. We don't eat. We don't do all, but we still engage the senses, but they are directed towards Krishna, and then by that we also experience higher pleasure, which gives us satisfaction. Yeah. Good.
I looked up where this analogy is coming from.
Mm.
It's from the Defects.
Oh yeah.
Can you know this one?
No.
It's from Shankaracharya.
Oh, okay. How did you what did you search for? How do you find it?
Dear music hunter,
Ah, okay, I did.
be flower, catch
okay,
caught.
Very good.
And it's so
Shankaracharya used
580 verses. 580 verses, and it explains the teachings of Advaita philosophy, basically.
Uh-huh.
But then it also starts with this. It's in German. But I bow down in front of Govinda, whose eternal nature is bliss. He is the knowing guru, teacher, who only through the knowledge of the whole Vedanta is to be known, and cannot be known through discourse and arguments. It's nice.
Yeah, nice. Okay, thank you very much. Good researcher. Has studied religion, science of religion. It's good. Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Ja, voll. Hast du welchen Service oder Argument?